Did you happen to pull any Gladiator Beast from your Maze of the Master packs at locals? Thanks to these new reprints, Gladiator Beast is now an affordable budget deck for Edison Format. So for the monsters, I played 2 copies of Gladiator Beast Darius. The reason why I'm playing 2 copies of Darius is because he's really good in the grind game, being able to revive a Gladiator Beast monster from the graveyard, be it either a Quarry or a Bestiary, can allow you to tag into your powerful fusion monsters. We play 2 copies of Bequest also because he's good in the grind game, by allowing to add back Gladiator Beast cards from the graveyard to your hand. Just 1 copy of Quarry, then I'm playing 1 copy of Bestiary, and for the last level 4 Gladiator Beast monster, I'm playing 1 copy of Secutor. Next I play 2 copies of Gladiator Beast Retiari, then I'm playing 1 copy of Samnite, and for the last Gladiator Beast monster I play 1 copy of Mirmillo. Then for the non-gladiators, I play 3 copies of Test Tiger, 2 copies of Prisma, and for the last monster in our deck, I play 1 copy of Rescue Cat. Then for the spells, I have 3 copies of Book of Moon, I'm playing 2 copies of Gladiator Beast Proving Ground. And then to remove their back row, I play 1 copy of Heavy Storm and 1 copy of Mystical Space Typhoon. Then for the trap cards, I'm playing 2 copies of Trap Stun in the main deck. I play 2 copies of War Chariot, 2 copies of Dimensional Prison, because I'm also playing 2 copies of Waboku, 2 copies of Bottomless Trap Hole, 1 copy of Starlight Road, 1 copy of Solemn Judgment, and with Road you can also play into their Dimensional Prison, without fear of losing to a Mirror Force or Torrential, which I'm also playing 1 copy each of. 1 copy of Trap Dust Chute, and 1 copy of Compulsory Evacuation Device. And then for the extra deck, I play a bunch of Synchros, most of which do not matter. I'm playing 1 copy of Ally of Justice Cataster as my level 5, 1 copy of Bryanak Dragon of the Ice Barrier, and 1 copy of Goyo Guardian as my level 6s, 1 copy of Black Rose Dragon as my level 7, 1 copy of Thoughtful Archfiend as my 1 level 8, and then 1 copy of Stardust Dragon as my 2nd level 8. So for the fusion monsters that actually matter, 3 copies of Geyseris, 3 copies of Heraclinos, and then 3 copies of Chimeratic Fortress Dragon. For the side deck, I have 1 copy of Hoplimus, 2 copies of DD Crow, then I play 2 copies of Cyber Dragon, 2 copies of Dimensional Fissure, 2 copies of Ancient Forest, 2 copies of Smashing Ground, the 3rd Trap Stun, the 3rd War Chariot, and 2 copies of Trap Hole. So how do you play Gladiator Beast in Edison Format? Something that I touched on in the deck profile is Waboku and Dimensional Prison. How a good opponent will be aware of these. So let's say you're going first, you set 2 back row and you summon a Retiari. Here, if your Vayu Turbo opponent would normal summon an Armageddon Knight, they would attack into your Retiari. If you were to flip a Waboku, your Retiari does not die and you tag out into a Mirmillo and you pop their Armageddon Knight. Even now, your position isn't looking that much better than theirs. So in the case of Retiari and 2 back row, your opponent would just summon Armageddon Knight and attack. Because there's not many ways that they can get punished. They could even send down a Necrogard Knight to the graveyard, and use it whenever you try to attack with the Secutor. So what if you summon something bigger than Armageddon Knight, be it either a Quest or Darius? Here if they summon Armageddon Knight, they're kinda forced to send Necrogard Knight to the graveyard. So let's go back to the scenario where you summon either Darius or a Quest against the Vayu Turbo deck, and they have Armageddon Knights. They will not summon Geddon, but would they summon Dark Grepher? In the case of a Quest, you could argue summoning Grepher, either using the effect or not, but at least attack over it. Would they attack Darius? There's a good chance your opponent has to read that you have Waboku face down. Partially because you set 2 on the first turn, but partially also because the deck plays Waboku, right? So a good player would usually not attack with Grepher into Darius, because there's just more cards that punish you, as opposed to doing something else. So what can we take from this? Maybe you just set the Darius. Let's say you go first. You set Darius, you set Waboku, and you set Deep Prison. What's your opponent really going to do? If I saw this, I would assume it's Vayu Turbo, because that's just the most common deck that would do something like this turn 1. If your opponent were to have Armageddon Knight or Grepher in their hand, would they even attack here? If they think it's a Raikou face down, you could argue them just summoning a Vayu or a Sirocco that they would have pitched, or they may summon a Grepher and they do pitch the piece, but then they still heavily play into your Waboku or Deep Prison. Mind you, you get to see what they dumped. If they dumped something like Necrogardna, or if they dump a Vayu and a Sirocco, you can make your plays based on that. Another option is that they do not do this at all, they just set 1 back row like an MST. If your opponent sets just 1 MST here, you just flip up the GB, and then you tag out into a Secutor. And here you maybe set 1 more back row in case they have an MST. But when you can present Secutor, your opponent's in a really weird position, because if they attack, you can use Waboku. If they don't attack, you can also just Secutor attack. If they have a bigger monster, you use Waboku. Or if their field is empty, you resolve the Secutor. What I want to get to with this is that sometimes the GB deck, especially in game 1, it may be worthwhile for you to just set a monster turn 1. Because of how the metagame is shaped up, with a set monster usually means a Vayu, or a Raiko, maybe even a Sangan. You can trick your opponent into doing various plays based on them thinking it's something that it's not. And then another play is if you have a GB and a Bestiari, make sure that you set the Bestiari, because you can contact fuse with face down monsters. By setting the Bestiari, you play around an opposing bottomless trap hole. Or if you have a Book of Moon in hand, you may actually want to summon the Bestiari, because if they do use bottomless on it, you would much rather book the Bestie, tag out into Geyseris, as opposed to booking the Geyseris against their bottomless. And then for another play related thing, if you have a Starlight Road face down, and you have a Gladiator Beast monster and a Test Tiger, you pass priority, thus allowing your opponent to activate cards like Torrential Tribute. By summoning Test Tiger here and not use its effect on summon, forces your opponent to use the TT here if they would like to remove both of your monsters before you get a tag out, thus allowing you to activate Starlight Road because they're trying to destroy 2 monsters. Do keep in mind that Bestiari's effect to pop a back row is mandatory, so if your opponent doesn't have any, you may have to pop your own. Darius only negates the Bestiari while Darius is face up. So for example, if you Book of Moon Darius, Bestiari will pop. Also, the Bestiari will still pop if you Book of Moon the Bestiari, because of how Book of Moon works with negated effects. I hope you guys learned something, either be it a ruling or just how to play this deck in general in Edison Format. Despite this not being a combo tutorial, I hope you found it thought-provoking. If you enjoy my content, make sure to also subscribe to my second channel, linked in the description box down below.